Minnehaha County Sheriff Mike Milstead says the drug abuse happening in our communities has a terrible and terrifying trickle-down effect, one the sheriff says he thinks about a lot.
It's heartbreaking, it's heart-wrenching. It is something that keeps me up at night. And anything that we can do, whether it's the community triage, whether it's mental health courts, because it's not just the drugs. It's other things in our society. It's the violence, the number of times we have gun calls.
Minnehaha County Sheriff Mike Milstead says something in society has changed, something that has made illegal drugs even more widespread and available than in years past, and that worries him.
We didn't used to hear the words heroin and fentanyl. Now we do, and there are people in our community dying from it.
From January 1st of this year through the 20th of July, there have been 12 overdose deaths in Minnehaha County. The drugs being used are dangerous to start with, but they're made even more so because in a lot of cases the drugs are homemade, and that makes them imprecise in terms of what is in them. And that imprecision is what makes these drugs even more deadly.
And you have people that are mixing these drugs that are not chemists. They're not pharmacists. And they're probably high themselves. And all they have to be off with, like carfentanil, is like the equivalent of a grain or two of salt. And it's the difference between living and dying. And we have people in our community that are dying from this stuff.
You may be watching this and thinking this situation doesn't affect you. You don't have a drug problem. Your kids are clean. But there are many in this community who aren't. And their desperation to get their hands on drugs makes them dangerous and willing to break into a home or commit assault, or steal a car, or guns. And that puts you in danger, meaning this situation does affect you. Milstead is especially concerned about those who are addicted to meth.
They're high risk to commit violent crimes. They're high risk to their family. They're high risk to endangering their children. I can't tell you how many drug-endangered children calls that have racked up in Minnehaha County and Sioux Falls, but they're way up because of people that are so addicted to methamphetamine that they totally ignore their kids, they don't care for their kids, they neglect their kids, they abuse their kids.
Heroin is also a concern right now in Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County, but for a slightly different reason. The sheriff says it is his experience that heroin addicts endure a quiet addiction. They may be less prone to committing violent crime, but it is that silence that makes heroin particularly dangerous for those who use it.
Our heroin users are often, when we first learn about that they're using heroin, it's because either they're on the brink of death in a corner in their house with a needle in their arm, or they're dead.
On the surface, it seems so contradictory. Sioux Falls is a growing city with a strong economy and good schools, and the county sheriff is talking about drug use and abuse and people dying as a result. And it is that seeming contradiction that Milstead says he needs the community to overcome if this war on drugs is going to be successful.
This is still one of the safest places in America to raise your family and to work. But there are some serious issues with drug abuse and drugs in our community that I think people are starting to understand, but I don't think everybody does.
And it is that contradiction, that misunderstanding among some in the community, that Milstead says creates a situation where sometimes he is challenged about what he is trying to do, with some openly questioning him about why we need to invest in a community triage center, asking him why he's trying to help these people instead of just arresting them and putting them away behind bars. Milstead says if addicts can beat their addiction, it makes the community safer.
My statutory duty is preservation of the peace and protection of life and property. If I can get a handle, and we can get a handle on the drug epidemic, in particular meth and opioids and heroin in our community, we're going to definitely impact, to the good side, our crime rate.
Sheriff Mike Milstead with us tonight on This Week in Politics. Up next, the words of Richard Nixon as he announced his resignation 44 years ago this coming week.
To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body.
That's next here on KSFY.